Hello and welcome to Healing Through the Holidays After Suicide Loss, the interview series on how to get through the celebrations with peace and joy, create new traditions to honor your loved one and keep their memory alive. I created the series to give you all a go-to place with plenty of helpful resources, advice and encouragement from those who are experts in their field, so you can have a festive period which is meaningful to you. Let's make a deal. Commit to taking one action after you watch this interview, because time alone doesn't heal all wounds. It's so important what you do with your time. I'm your host, Cara Brookings, and with me today is Georgena Eccleston. Georgena is a speaker, trauma specialist, and author of A New Morning, Discovering the Gifts in Grief. After 5 members of her family died in less than 4 years, and 2 of them by suicide, she discovered that grief lives within us. She now certifies professionals to companion individuals to move through and beyond their embodied grief. Welcome back, Georgena. It's so good to have you with us again. Tell us a bit more about your story and how you got here.
Thank you. It's so nice to be back. In 1994, I got the phone call, Mark's dead. And in that moment, I knew I would never grow old with my brother, Mark. And every single person watching this video right now remembers that phone call, or remembers finding your person, or maybe even some of you, the feeling of being close to suiciding yourself. But it was the impulsive suicide of my teenage son, Reed, that brought me to my knees. Reed was that handsome, charismatic, kind, generous, sensitive, athletic, artistic, loyal friend. And it was just a shattering, absolutely shattering experience. And what happened was I was not broken by the grief, but I was broken open to grow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so sorry for your loss as well. It just reminded me of, I remember you saying that last time, and how you said it's like a seed, right? The seed breaks open and then the plant grows, and I just love that. I love that analogy. So yeah,
yes.
Thank you
and that's what I'm calling the new paradigm of grief. Is when we can realize we're not broken by this horrific loss, but broken open like a seed to grow in awareness. Awareness that we're not alone. Awareness that each person's life is their life. I have a mother whose son died of suicide, and he had depression. And they knew that this was coming. This was the way his life would end. And yet there's that guilt that's there and feeling like, but I said to her, you can't stop a tornado. And that's why when I got the call of Mark's death, my brother's death, I had known I would never grow old with him, that there was something in me. And so my message to her as we're working together is to say, if your son died of cancer or a heart attack, would what would your experience be? You would have done everything you could, just like you did with this. And he still died.
Yeah, I think that's one of those really important things to realize, that each and every one of us did the best we could, and sometimes unfortunately it still wasn't enough, but sometimes so many things really there beyond our control. But because there's this difference between the physical illness and the mental illness, we just seem to feel like we should have been able to do something.
And this grief journey for me, I was broken open like a seed to grow in awareness. I became able to navigate deep, dark emotions. I began to really discover those deep, dark parts of myself that were longing to be heard and healed. And I'm grateful to say I'm no longer the perfectionist. Oh, yes, I have to be aware when she comes up and wants to be seen, but I'm not that. And then I was able to really delve into the question, who am I now?
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, I did grow in awareness as a result of these deaths
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
suicide. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of our viewers are anxious about the upcoming holidays. Do you have some suggestions of what they can do to have a festive period which is meaningful to them?
Yes, yes. It was interesting because that very first Thanksgiving, when Reed was gone, we had now 5 family members. And so I gathered my husband and my son, and I said, okay, you know that if we fail to plan for this holiday that's going to be like none we've ever had before, we're planning to fail. So that's the first thing for all of you watching this. The holidays are going to come, whether you like them or not. So you may either resist them or you may allow them on your terms. And there may be a part of you that wants to feel joyous. Please give yourself permission to do that. There may be a part of you that wants to be under the covers from the end of November or October all the way through the end of the year. And honor that part and know that it is the emotion of love that really fuels the holidays. And that's what you're struggling with, is the love for that physical person that's no longer here. So how can you make choices that are loving and honoring you and that person who is departed and those around you? Because there's a lot of people around you that really want you to be happy. And so think, feel, what is the one tradition we had that would fill my heart and remind me of that person? So for us, being who we are in the United States, it was hanging up those Christmas stockings. So we hung up Reed's stocking, and I still do it every year. And this Christmas will be the 24th Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so important to choose those things. Now, that first Thanksgiving, I created the centerpiece that my mother had always created. But this time, I stuck in 5 pheasant feathers for those families who had passed. Mother would have been horrified because my mother was a nurse, and you don't bring something like feathers and put them on the table. But I did it anyway. And as I stuck each one in, and then Mother had this wonderful Christmas decoration that was artificial. So I got 5 gold star candles, and I put them in that. And that became the centerpiece then through the Christmas holidays. And I've never lit those candles, and they're one of my prized possessions, those 5 golden star candles. And as I put each one out, I bring to mind one wonderful memory of each person. And that fills my heart and gives me an opportunity to go inside, because as you and I both know, grief is an inside job.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to plan for the holidays, realize what is important for you, for that person that's passed, and for those around you. And most of all, take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
Find that one tradition that can still bring a sliver of light and happiness and a tiny little smile to your face. And allow that one, and then create a new one.
Yeah, I love that so much, especially, focusing just on the one thing, because during the holidays, so many things are going on and we feel like we're being pulled in all kinds of directions. So if we can just put our focus even on that one thing, which allows us to connect with our loved one. Like you said, when you put it out, have that memory of them and really feel that connection really go inside yourself. I think that's a really beautiful way to start and to go through the holidays.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because here in the United States, the Day of the Dead that's celebrated in Mexico has become part of our culture now. And I find that absolutely a sacrednicity, because what it does is it, in a way, begins the holiday season with the ancestors and giving us permission to put out their pictures, to put out their favorite foods, to be in that place of that altar space that we create. And then the next holiday in the United States that we celebrate is Thanksgiving. And your Thanksgiving in Canada is on a different date, but you still have it too. And very often in grief, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I have anything to be thankful about. And I get that. Just being able to gather at the table and leave a place for them at the table is a way to honor them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, with Christmas, it started as that solstice when it was the darkest time of the year, and people brought light into the darkness. And so for us to simply, you don't have to do presents, you don't have to do parties, but how are you going to bring the light in for this Christmas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So thinking, in terms of what is the essence of the holiday? Celebrating the ancestors' Day of the Dead, Thanksgiving. Oh, I'm so thankful we can be together, or there's food on the table, or we have a roof over our head. I know that might seem trite, but it's really important to be in the awareness of the gifts that we still have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that you mentioned the Day of the Dead, and then it's growing in popularity in the US, because in Germany there's something called the Sunday of the Dead, and it's probably around a similar time. And I remember growing up, my mom was always very, very strict that we weren't allowed to do anything Christmassy before the Sunday of the Dead. And my friends would make fun of me and eat gingerbread and sing Christmas songs. And I was like, no, I can't yet. So that's a really nice connection and memory that I have with my mom, especially since she took her life around that day. And to have that day, and then, people go to the cemetery to honor their loved ones and think about them and all these kinds of things. And like you said, once we've completed that ritual, then the Christmas period starts. So that's very similar for me, and I still do that to this day.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you do. Is there a specific date, or does it come like on a certain day?
Yeah, so it's a Sunday, and the way it works, it's the Sunday before the first Advent.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So it changes. Sometimes it even falls on my mom's anniversary, because she took her life on November 22nd, but it's always around that sort of time. So it's got a lot of meaning for me to connect with my mom and, feel those grief bursts that often come out around the anniversary. And then once that's complete and I've worked through that, and I say, okay, now onto the holidays, which, you know, with 3 young children myself now, it's become more of a joyous period for me again, not as much as a struggle it has been to begin with.
And that's, I'm imagining, because of your intention. You leaned into it, you didn't resist it, you allowed whatever it was to come up, and over time then things change. You know, that cliche, that awful cliche, time heals all wounds. No. What heals us is us doing the work, us showing up, feeling the feelings so we can heal. That's what changes. That's what allows us to move from that raw grief of crying, fragile grief, holding ourselves together, and then the gentle grief.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I love that you share that with our viewers, that grief changes, because what I often find when I work with my clients is they're afraid that the grief that they're in that moment always stays the same, even if they're a year or two in and they can see how their grief has changed in the first 2 years. People can't seem to wrap their head around that the grief is always going to change and develop in a way.
Grief is always going to be there. And I describe, as I just did, you know, the raw grief, the fragile grief, and finally the gentle grief. And it was very interesting because on Saturday, we had here in Portland, Oregon, the Out of the Darkness Walk. And it was amazing because we had over 1,000 people there. It was at a new location. And in 2019, the last time we walked, there were close to 3,500 people that walked. But anyway, so many people showed up to honor their beloveds. And I happened to be the speaker this year. And so after I spoke, you know, a few people that I knew, we talked, and all of a sudden this woman came up as the walk had started. And she came up to me with tears streaming down her face. And she said, "Thank you so much. This is really what I needed." And we just hugged. And she melted back into the crowd of walkers. And I looked up in the sky. It was the most beautiful blue sky. And there was a jet that was just this much of the contrail you could see. And that's Reed's message to me, my son. And it was as if, okay, Mom, you've grown in awareness. You've grown. I'm saying I see you, and I'm here. It was just lovely.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So nice when we get those signs from our loved ones, especially during such a poignant moment, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so again, give yourself permission to really listen and allow and find your way through. And remember, there's so many people out there that want to do something with you and for you. And that might be a time where you gather your friends and say, okay, I can't do this holiday. How can you help me? Or what can we make our tradition look like this year?
Yeah.
And they'll be thrilled. You won't be imposing.
And communication is so important, because I think others often want to support us in the best way they can, but they're unsure how to do it. So if we can communicate with them, okay, I really can't do the holidays. Can we do this? Or can you do that for me? They're most of the time really willing to do that. And I think relief, because they're right, okay, I know I can do this, and I know this will be helpful. So definitely very important to communicate.
And that's what's so important, is grief will always be with us. It becomes different. And so this year, the holidays will be different the next year. And just like, I looked up at that jet in the sky, and it brought up gentle grief. It brought up, like Old Faithful, I cried, tears. I didn't wail, I cried. And so, that gentle grief is the hope that I have for every person listening, that's where you're at. And you are experiencing that with the Sunday before Advent now, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. And so we do this, you and I, so people know that grief is not a life sentence. It's always with us, but it becomes different.
Yeah, absolutely. And why is it so important that we use our loved one's name, that we talk about them and say their name?
When we say their name, they're not forgotten. And so it's very important. Now, those of you may know that it makes people feel uncomfortable. And so Saturday afternoon, I went off and had an event with a colleague of mine who's also a mind-body therapist. And we were having fun, and she was sharing, we hadn't seen each other for months, so catching up on what we've been doing. So I shared the morning that I'd had, and I shared the jet and said Reed's name, and she was just delighted. So it's so important for us to say their name, because they lived and had a profound impact, no matter how short or long their life.
Yeah. And it reminds me of that quote, and I'm not 100% sure who said it, so I don't want to say the wrong name, but it goes something like this: and we die twice, once when we draw our last breath, and the other time when our last loved one says our name. So that is quite profound to think about.
Yes, it is indeed. Right. And so, as I said to the people on Saturday, remember who you are. Remember what a gift you are, because when you show up with at least one quality of the person that died of suicide, you honor them. You honor them.
And on the other side, I also think that it gives other people an opportunity to talk about them as well. It opens the conversation, right?
Yes.
We said their name, it's like, okay, it's obviously okay, and then maybe we can share some memories. And
yes. So and that conversation that day then opened for my friend and I, talking about her mother that passed, her father that had passed, her brother who's dying of a brain tumor, all these things. And that awareness then of that really deep level of conversation happened because I said Reed's name and shared that event that happened to me in the morning. Yeah. So it takes courage to be a griever. And I've really never said it in those words before, but it does. It takes courage to get out of bed in the morning. It takes courage to say their name. And yet life is to be lived 100%. And so when we choose to have the courage, we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So wrapping up then, if you were to leave our viewers with one single action today, what would it be?
Plan your holidays. Because remember, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And you deserve the light, the joy, and the love that is the truth of you to be reflected around you as well as within you.
Absolutely. And I know you've got a free gift to give away today, which we'll link to below this video. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Oh, yes. One of the things is, we've all heard of the 12 days of Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are the 12 truths of grieving. And what these are things that over time I've discovered and my clients have affirmed for me. For instance, grief is a natural consequence of loss. Okay. Another one, grief lives in your body. And grief disconnects us from ourselves. So there are 12 of these, and each one has a beautiful illustration. So I invite you to print them out on maybe heavy paper, like a poster board, put them around your home, or just use one a week when the new year starts, so that you've got that 12 weeks of support after the 12 days of Christmas. You'll figure out how to use them. Just print them, though, please.
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful, wonderful support. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for speaking with us today. Do you have any final thoughts?
I'm so grateful to you for doing this wonderful series, and for all of you that have shown up, because once again, it takes courage to do this. So sit with this. Maybe this year, instead of the Christmas movies that are too hard to watch this beautiful series that's been gifted to you by this wonderful one.
Oh, thank you. And to our viewers, be sure to tune into our next interviews for more valuable advice and support on your suicide bereavement journey through the holidays. Until then, take care and see you in the next interview. Bye-bye.